CBS News 24/7. On to the Middle East now. Hamas confirms the death of its leader, Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind behind the October 7th attack in Israel. Hamas now says it will not free the hostages until there is a ceasefire and withdrawal from Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the takedown of Sinwar the, quote, beginning of the end. Sinwar is among at least 5 top Hamas and Hezbollah leaders killed since the war started. So CBS News reporter Haley Ott joining us live from Tel Aviv now to talk more about all of this. Global leaders around the world there, including the U.S., do in fact see this opportunity as a ceasefire. But where do negotiations stand today?
Yes, as you say, there are people that are hopeful this is an opportunity for a ceasefire, but those negotiations that you mentioned really ground to a halt over the summer. In August, pretty much all the parties at the table walked away, and that was because each side started accusing one another of either moving the goalposts or not really being willing to make a deal in the end. But now we have a change in a dynamic, and that is making the international community hopeful. President Biden is sending Antony Blinken to the region to talk about security in Gaza, maybe after the war. But the signaling that we're getting from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he said that Sinwar's death, the killing of Sinwar, doesn't mean that this war is over, though it is his aim to get the hostages back home. And the signaling we're getting from Hamas, who in their official statement today spoke about sort of the continued existence of the group. Senior Hamas officials said that the group isn't really dependent on one leader. So it is very much up in the air at this point, and it remains to be seen what will happen in terms of a ceasefire negotiation.
Absolutely. So the next question is, there have been reports about who could end up leading Hamas next. Are you hearing anything on that front?
Yes, there have been a number of rumors. There have been names that have been sort of put out there. But when we ask Hamas officials, what we get back is a big, I don't know. A lot of what appears to be the case at this point is people are scrambling. They're trying to decide what to do next. Communications aren't great between people on the ground in Gaza. So we at this point just really have no visibility into what the next steps will be in terms of leadership of Hamas.
All right, Haley Ott from Tel Aviv. Haley, thank you for that update there. Meanwhile, President Biden just left Germany, where he met with foreign leaders about the conflicts brewing in the Middle East. He did take a moment to speak to reporters on the tarmac, saying the road to peace in the region is going to be difficult. Take a listen.
Can you give us a sense about the Middle East peace? You said it's going to be harder. Do you have any sense of a timeline? Are you putting more pressure on Netanyahu?
It was an opportunity, in my view, and my colleagues agree, that you should probably deal with Israel and Iran in a way that ends the conflict for a while.
Say that again?
It ends the conflict. In other words, it stops the back and forth. We think that there's a possibility of working to a ceasefire in Lebanon, and it's going to be harder in Gaza, but we agree that there has to be an outcome. What happened the day after?
Do you have a good understanding right now what Israel is going to do in response to Iran's October 1st attacks, and when they will actually respond to Iran?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell us?
No.
Sir, did you hear any concerns about the upcoming American election? Are your fellow leaders worried?
They're heavy.
Did you get reassurance from Netanyahu yesterday on your phone calls that no willing come to the table on his ceasefire?
Well, I'm not going. We're in the middle of discussions on that. I'm not going to be meaning that.
But suppose, is there any chance that you would, on Ukraine, that you would change your mind on long-range weapons, allowing them to strike deeper into Russia, which is one of the main proposals that Zelensky put out?
I mean, foreign policy, there's never I never changed my mind. Right now, there's no consensus to long-range weapons.
What would have to happen for you to change your mind on that?
I'm not going to speculate.
What's the consensus on the Ukraine victory?
All right, let's get to CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. He's joining us live now from Berlin. So, Willie, President Biden says that all of the leaders are technically on the same page. What else did we get from this meeting?
Hey there, Julia. Good to be with you from Berlin. Well, President Biden met with the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany to discuss a range of issues, as he talked about there on the tarmac before he departed back for the United States. And one of those sticking points, they might be on the same page when it comes to you further supporting Ukraine, but they still have to get through the red tape, so to speak, to get Ukraine this $50 billion loan that's backed by seized Russian assets. There's a lot of red tape that the Europeans and everyone involved wants to make sure that they cross off before they get that money to them. But the goal is to get them that money by the end of the year. Now, the president also taking questions on the Middle East. He said previously that this essentially is an opening with the death of Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. This is an opening for peace and to bring the hostages back home. Now, we heard from John Kirby, the NSC spokesperson, earlier today, and he essentially said that just because Sinwar is dead, it doesn't necessarily mean that negotiations will start and pop right back up tomorrow. But that is an ongoing conversation that the president and other world leaders will, of course, have in the coming days as we assess the response from that response, what will be from Israel and Hamas. Juliet.
Yeah, and Willie, this obviously being the president's last trip, essentially there as president of the United States. So what else came out of the meetings that was notable?
Yeah, it was an interesting and perhaps an emotional trip for President Biden. He is someone who has been really in the trenches when it comes to foreign policy, both as vice president serving under President Obama, but before that as a U.S. senator on the Foreign Relations Committee. And one of the things that happened today was that the president, he received the Order of the Merit Award here in Germany, the highest civilian honor in this country. The last U.S. president, and only U.S. president to receive this award before President Biden, was George H.W. Bush in the early 1990s. So a significant moment there. And the reason why the Germans decided to give President Biden this award is because his support of the transatlantic partnership between Germany and the Europeans. And the president of Germany noted as much, that essentially when President Biden was elected, that ability to maintain those alliances really just got stronger overnight. Perhaps a dig at former President Donald Trump. That is certainly something that's on the minds of European leaders here, most notably the Germans. Germany is number 2 when it comes to that support for Ukraine. They want to see that continue, but it's an open question as to whether or not that will continue to happen if former President Donald Trump becomes president of the United States. Juliet.
Willie James Inman joining us live from Berlin. Thank you so much. All right, we want to get to some new developments. About an hour ago, a federal judge released more than 1,800 pages of documents filed by special counsel Jack Smith in the 2020 election interference case. It includes new details about former President Donald Trump's actions leading up to the January 6th assault on the Capitol. So I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane right now. I know there are a lot of pages to go through, more than 1,800 pages that have been unsealed. But what are we learning about what has been unsealed right now?
Oh, this is the legal equivalent of somebody putting Tolstoy's War and Peace in front of you over lunch and saying, enjoy this while you have your sandwich. 1,900 pages of legal documents is quite a Herculean challenge to get through. What is making this somewhat simpler is the majority of the pages, an overwhelming majority of those pages, remain sealed. They are blocked out from public view. They've been sealed by the court, potentially including information that should not yet be in the public view. So what's remaining? An awful lot of interviews with key witnesses and that House January 6th Select Committee. Remember that? They investigated January 6th. Some of the components of those interviews are going to try to buttress the special counsel's argument that not only did Donald Trump commit a crime, but that what he did in allegedly trying to overturn the 2020 election, conspiring to do so, was private action, not official action, that he did so as a citizen or as a candidate, not as the President of the United States, which is critical and weight-bearing in this case because on July 1st, the Supreme Court gave Trump some amount of presidential immunity for official acts. We've seen in these documents the actual envelopes used to mail those electoral certificates to Washington, D.C. from the states Trump was challenging. We've seen some of the memos that were being exchanged by Trump allies. Descriptions of some of the conversations undertaken by Trump and his allies before January 6th as Jack Smith tries to make this case that not only did Donald Trump conspire to overturn an election, but that he did so not as president, but as a candidate.
Yes, Scott, let's talk about the timing of all of this. I know that the judge also really pushed back on Trump's arguments that unveiling the evidence should actually be delayed until after the election. So walk us through the timing of this in the ruling.
Trump's team tried hard to get this thing pushed back, this last batch of records likely to be released before the election. Trump's team tried to get this thing pushed until about a week after the election. The judge in this case, Washington, D.C. Judge Tanya Chutkin, rejected that argument and made an indication in her ruling that to hold back this information and criminal case information before an election would itself be a form of election interference. So she has allowed this to be unsealed on the public docket. Some of these things we knew already. They're from public-facing things. They actually have dozens and dozens of pages of Trump's January 6th and pre-January 6th tweets. We've seen them before. A couple anecdotes we didn't know already. For example, there's a White House aide who's quoted in these records saying when he alerted Trump to rioting going on at the Capitol as he returned into the White House January 6th, he then went to fetch Donald Trump a Diet Coke as the TV watching was to begin. These are things Trump might not want coming out 18 days before an election, reminding America of January 6th, the horrors and the history, but it has landed on the public docket on this Friday.
Scott MacFarlane. Scott, thank you so much. All right, coming up here on CBS News 24/7, our video feeds head back to the campaign trail. We're talking 18 days until the election. Both candidates in the crucial state of Michigan. We'll take you there coming up. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Turning to Florida now. Video to our monitors out of Brooksville. It shows crews at work in this chest-deep water to turn the power back on. Hurricane Milton slammed over the area about a week ago, but about 18,000 people still without power. So that is according to poweroutage.us. Milton hit as the state is still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. In Hernando Beach, piles of furniture and debris are left on people's front lawns. People still cleaning up from all of that. So let's go to Zoe Mintz to talk about just kind of the area there and the conditions.
Yeah, they saw a really bad 1-2 punch from those two storm systems. But good news, we talked about it last week. Nadine is not on the way. There's nothing to worry about right now, and nothing to worry about for at least the next 48 to 72 hours, as there's no systems that are forming in the current moment over the Atlantic and the Caribbean. And it's mostly going to be the Gulf of Mexico that we are concerned about when it comes to that tropical activity that's ramping up. And you can actually see two of those storm systems that we're currently monitoring. One that is heading over towards Central America and another one that's right behind it. You can see both clearly from space. This is our satellite imagery. And the good news about this system is they are both going to stay well to our south. This is the loop over the next 24 hours. There's not all too much to talk about across the United States, which is really good news. We're going to hold off on that tropical activity for at least, again, our next couple of days. Let's take a look at that right now, that tropical activity that we did see. A little bit of it, again, closer to Central America, and that has the better potential of actually forming into a tropical system. Our secondary one, it's a little bit smaller, a little bit more unorganized, and only about a 10% chance of formation in the next 48 hours. And likely it's going to be just remaining down towards the Caribbean, because there's really great news. To the east coast of the United States, we have a protective cold front. This low pressure system, the same one that brought a little bit of that snow to North Carolina, is bringing us along with an accentuated cold front. This cold front is keeping all of the activity from those two tropical systems well to our south, and we are not expecting any of it to impact us here in the United States. It's likely going to impact Central America, bring quite a lot of rain to them, and we'll be heading towards Turks and Caicos as well. But for the United States and for Florida, at least they can continue to take deep breaths. Florida can continue to rebuild and recover and enjoy a really great weekend of weather out there before the potential next week. We'll continue to keep our eyes on those tropical storms.
We need those breaks in between for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Zoe. So from ex-Olympic snowboarder to now wanted by the FBI, Ryan Whelan faces federal charges alleging he ordered killings as part of a cocaine trafficking ring. The unsealed indictment details charges against Whelan and 15 other defendants. Authorities say the billion-dollar operation used stash houses in Los Angeles and trafficked drugs across North America. Let's jump the map now to Tennessee. A 3-judge panel blocked the state from disciplining doctors for performing emergency abortions. It comes after a group of patients and doctors filed a lawsuit over vague conditions of an exception under the Tennessee's strict abortion law. The plaintiffs said it caused doctors to stop performing abortions, thinking they could face criminal charges. Search and rescue teams in Washington state now racing to find 2 Navy pilots after their fighter jet crashed. The pilots took off on a routine training flight Tuesday in an EA-18 Growler like the one you see here. They crashed near Mount Rainier. Search crews say it is unclear if the pilots were able to eject in time or if they went down with the jet. Our monitors now taking us to Indiana. Opening statements underway in the trial of a man accused of killing 2 teen girls in Delphi. It is a small town about an hour northwest of Indianapolis. 52-year-old Richard Allen faces 130 years in prison if convicted. So CBS News correspondent Meg Oliver is live outside the Carroll County Courthouse there. So Meg, this case has been unsolved for years. Catch us up to how we got to this point.
Jules, it's been nearly 7 years since this tiny town of Delphi, Indiana, population 3,000, was rocked by the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German. 2 8th graders went out for a walk February 23rd, 2017. They were best friends and never returned home. The next day, their bodies were found stabbed to death less than a half mile from that walking trail. Then, over the years, police interviewed multiple suspects. They even had a grainy image that they recovered from Libby's phone of the suspect, but no arrest was made until 2022. That's when they zeroed in on Allen, a local pharmacy employee. Police connected an unspent bullet to Allen's phone, and that's when he was arrested. Now, the defense wants to point out that Allen reached out to police shortly after the murders. He lived very close to that walking trail, and he wanted police to know that he was on the trail that day. Now, during opening statements today, both sides laid out their case. Prosecutors, for the first time, said that Allen confessed to details that only the killer would know. The defense countered, saying that he never confessed to anything voluntarily and that Allen was suffering from a mental illness during that time. It's really important to note there is virtually no physical evidence in this trial. There's no murder weapon and there is no DNA linked to Allen. During the opening statements, we did hear from the prosecution saying that Allen took a gun and pointed it at the girls, leading them down the hill, but that is not considered the murder weapon. Again, they were stabbed to death. A few more points I want to just bring up, because we know that the judge here is keeping this trial under a very tightly locked down. There are no cameras allowed inside court. There's only a sketch artist, and the pool reporter just came out a short time ago. We know that the jury is made up of 5 men and 7 women. There aren't a lot of seats in the courtroom. The victims' families did not have enough seats on their side. One person actually had to cross the aisle to sit on the other side during opening statements. Jules?
Wow. So, Meg, Allen has claimed innocence. Is that correct? So what then will his lawyers use as the defense?
Well, that is right, Jules. So basically, they are saying that Allen is innocent. He never confessed voluntarily, and that he was mentally ill during those confessions. They're also pointing to the fact that there's virtually no physical evidence. There's no DNA linking him, and there's no weapon. And police also have to answer the question. There was a hair found in Libby's hand that is not connected to Allen. So there's a lot of questions. We talked to a prominent defense attorney who has been following this case from the very beginning, who told us that this is not going to be a slam dunk for the prosecution. I also want to point out the judge wants to ensure that this is a fair trial. And in order to do that, there's a gag order in place, and the jury has been sequestered for the duration of this trial, which could last more than a month. They've had to give up all of their devices, including cell phones. They can only make a supervised phone call with a bailiff standing next to them. Jules?
CBS News correspondent Meg Oliver in Delphi, Indiana. Meg, thank you. The Texas Supreme Court blocked what could be the first execution in the nation for shaking his baby to death. CBS News national correspondent Nikki Batiste reports on Robert Robertson's lawyer's last-minute civil appeal with the Texas High Court to suspend his execution.
Robert Robertson's life has been spared for now. In what was one of his last lifelines, a group of bipartisan Texas lawmakers issued a subpoena requiring Robertson to testify at a hearing next week as they reconsider the lawfulness of his case. It was an unprecedented legal strategy, and it worked. Just 90 minutes before Robertson was set to die by lethal injection, a Texas judge ordered a restraining order, essentially to keep Robertson alive so he could testify. And then the Texas Supreme Court agreed, ultimately giving a stay to his execution. Robertson's lawyers have appealed many times and failed. Their argument for clemency this week also was denied. His lawyers say that an autopsy revealed Robertson's daughter did not die from shaken baby syndrome, but from pneumonia. So the next steps, we expect Robertson to testify on Monday to a state House committee here in Texas. A prison spokesperson said when he learned of the stay, he praised God and thanked his supporters. For CBS News, I'm Nikki Batiste in Huntsville, Texas.
Coming up on our video monitors, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump on the campaign trail. We will have live reports for you coming up. You are watching CBS News 24/7. In just a few moments, Vice President Kamala Harris will take the stage to give remarks in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We will have her comments in just a minute. And it comes as both Harris and Trump blitz the battleground state today with multiple stops scheduled. The former president expected to hold roundtable talks before heading over to Detroit for a campaign rally. So CBS News political director Finn Gomez has the latest from both campaigns. So thank you for joining us. Let's begin with the Harris campaign. 52 coordinated campaigns, 375 staff across the state. How much is at stake right now for the campaign?
It's crucial. If you look at those three Midwestern states, if you look at those three Rust Belt states, or they're otherwise known as the Blue Wall states, Michigan is right there and key. Those 15 electoral votes are top of the list for the Harris campaign in their strategy to 270 on the electoral map. Now, what she is doing there by barnstorming across the state is to try to shore up on some crucial voting demographics, crucial voting groups that she needs to win on November 5th, and that is shoring up black voters in places like Detroit and Flint, but also trying to reach out to and shore up union voters. Of course, we've seen some erosion to Donald Trump in recent cycles, especially on social issues, but the other really key group, and this is really crucial here, are suburban voters. There's been some great reporting by CBS's Aaron Navarro and Nydia Cavazos on this front, where the strategy by the campaign is to really try to appeal to the suburban voters outside of Detroit and other big areas of Michigan, where they believe that through this group, through this demographic, that they can beat Donald Trump in Michigan. However, it is so tight, it is so close. Most polls show an absolute dead heat of a race with just 18 days to go until November 5th.
All right, let's talk about the Trump campaign. It heads back to Detroit for another rally. So what does he need to do in Michigan to secure ballots from the undecided voters?
Yeah, and that's interesting, though. About undecided voters, especially this time around, there aren't a lot of them. Probably maybe less than 10%, about 5% overall. But what his campaign is doing is trying to appeal to union voters. This is a blue-collar state, a lot of blue-collar jobs, and again, you have seen some shifting from union voters from Democrats to Donald Trump, especially on his appeal to them on social issues. Surprisingly, for many, immigration is one of the top issues in that battleground state, and even though they border, their border is the northern border, of course, with Canada, but it is a top issue, especially with Republican voters and some blue collar voters there. And then in this last stretch before November 5th, the Trump campaign is really emphasizing and really trying to utilize that as a political tool to pull folks over to their side. It is a battle of margins where just a few thousand votes can really make a difference in who wins this crucial state.
All right, let's get to some new information. CBS News has learned that Trump sought new DNA documents from Stormy Daniels. So what do we know about that? What does that mean?
Yes, and there's been some great reporting by CBS News' Katrina Kaufman and Graham Cates on this issue that according to documents obtained by CBS News, the legal representation of the adult film star Stormy Daniels was approached by Trump World Contacts to essentially see about establishing a relationship there to essentially stop her from talking about Donald Trump in the lead up to 2024 with the potential financial incentive to do so. We're still getting some reporting on that issue, on this story, getting more details, but it's something that, of course, if you recall, this was it has ties to the previous cases with the hush money case and others, defamation case. So I think it opens up a box, if you will, where the Trump campaign thought that they didn't have to deal with it, but now with so close to the election, I think there have been some critics that say that by doing this, it brings attention back to Trump and sort of the character issue that Vice President Harris talks about so much on the campaign trail.
CBS News political editor and director Fin Gomez, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, much more ahead. Coming up, where negotiations stand in the Middle East after Hamas leader Sinwar was killed. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Here at CBS News 24/7, we are still monitoring the latest out of the Middle East. Hamas confirms the death of its leader, Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind behind the October 7th attack in Israel. Hamas now says it will not free the hostages until there is a ceasefire and withdrawal from Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the takedown of Sinwar the, quote, beginning of the end. White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby spoke earlier today about what the death of Sinwar means for the conflict.
Yes, Sinwar was the main obstacle to getting a ceasefire done. Every time his political advisors we'd negotiate with and through them to come up with a proposal, it would have to get to him. Of course, that took time because of the communications challenges, and then he would just refute it and refuse to move forward. And it's not as if, as I've said this before, it's not as if the Israelis weren't willing to continue to find compromises, and they did. Each and every time, Sinwar found a way to stop it. Now he's gone, so we'll see. I mean, Hamas obviously will make their own decisions about what their structure is going to look like and if and who might replace Mr. Sinwar. But yes, his death does provide a unique opportunity here to try to take advantage of where we are with Hamas, where Israel is with Hamas, and see if we can't get a ceasefire in place.
Kirby also touched on the violence breaking out on Israel's northern front and Lebanon. The country now calling up additional reserve brigades for the ongoing missions taking place in the region. Meanwhile, leaders in the U.S. hoping a potential ceasefire in the south will bleed into the tensions brewing in the north. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Deborah Pata has the latest.
The people crossing here know war only too well. This is not the first time that they have fled war. Many of them are Syrians who fled the war in their country years ago for relative safety and security in Lebanon. And now they are crossing over back into Syria to escape war once again. We spoke to a woman who told us that it was just too dangerous to stay in the south, that they have been under constant bombing, and she's taking her young daughter to Syria. She hopes for not too long so that she can return home and that peace will come soon to her adopted country. They bring the possessions that they can, and it's quite difficult, as you can see. There is this big crater. This was as a result of an Israeli airstrike. They have to cross on foot, getting onto a bus here to get a ride into Syria. Many of them tell us that they will stay there until things are more peaceful back in Lebanon. Many of them crossing into Syria tell us that they will stay there for as long as they need to until there is peace back home.
Paul Whelan, a former U.S. Marine held hostage in a Russian prison for over 5 years, speaking out in his first interview with CBS News since his release. Whelan was part of the historic prisoner swap back in August. He was arrested while traveling to Moscow for a friend's wedding and was convicted of espionage in a secret trial. Whelan sat down with Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan. They talk about his experience behind bars and life after that. Whelan says his transition home is challenging and he suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder.
From day one, I was being told that there would be a trade, a political solution to this situation. But as it dragged on, it did play with my mind. There was a psychological piece to this that even though now, I seem like I'm doing okay. I've put back on some of the weight that I lost. I see a picture of me from the prison, or I see a picture of me from court that's on TV. And that takes me back to being in that court or being in the prison.
You have PTSD.
Yeah, it's a form of PTSD. And it's common, with people that have been in this situation. It'll go away probably over a few years. But it's hard to, compartmentalize and block out that portion of what I went through.
You can watch Paul's full interview on CBS's Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan this Sunday. All right, jumping the map now to California, where high fire danger is top of mind. A red flag warning is in effect for parts of the state. These dangerous conditions could prompt the state's utility company to shut off power to thousands of customers this weekend. People living in Napa County say they are no stranger to power shutoffs, and they are prepared.
It's not convenient, but we're used to it. And anybody that's lived here for any amount of time is certainly prepared for that.
This is getting ready for this. We basically keep these two freezers running with generators, and then we populate this with as much of our ice as we can so we don't lose any of that. That's always kind of fun. And then this generator out here, just big old bad boy, and just keep it going.
Boy, just being on the West Coast here, Zoe, we know how those residents are feeling. This hasn't been the first time it's happened to them. It won't be the last time, but they know how to get prepared.
Exactly.
For sure. And a lot of them think about this. They're still trying to get fire insurance from the last time around. So it is a struggle, but they'll take no power to be safe.
Oh, 100%. Because anything that causes sparks, any sort of electrical objects outdoors that does spark a little bit, don't even try to use it today, because it is one of those days that the red flag danger is so high. Any tiny little spark, even just throwing your cigarette out the window, could potentially spark a wildfire. Let's take a look at what we're seeing across the west coast of the United States, because all across California, where the fire danger is highest, there is not a single cloud in the sky to bring any sort of relief when it comes to that moisture. We're expecting this dry air to continue to make its way further south. This big air mass in blue, this is dry air in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and it's actually really interesting to see these strong northerly winds that's literally taking in this dry air mass and bringing it over California. So the dry air mass mixed with these extremely gusty winds. Look at the colors I'm standing on top of right now that are in those darker reds. Those are gusty winds combined with the dry air. Unfortunately, that is the reason that we do have that red flag warning and that fire danger that is going to persist through California all weekend long. It's something that we're keeping a very, very close eye on. These red flag warnings, again, the same color as my jacket right now, is that highest fire danger. But what you also might notice is there's a lot of colors around me, and it's not just fire danger that we're worried about. There's also these colors in blue, in pink, and in purple across the Rockies, because they're dealing with almost the opposite of fire danger. They're actually looking at right now a snowstorm. This snowstorm could potentially drop upwards of 1 to 2 feet of snowfall across parts of the Rocky Mountains, mainly in southern Colorado. So again, this same exact storm system that's bringing 1 to 2 feet of snow across the Four Corners is also bringing in the fire danger and the dry air across the West Coast. So it's pretty crazy to see what one storm system can do, two extremely different impacts from that one system. Snow on one side and very cold weather, dry air, windy conditions, and above average temperatures on the other side of that system.
Right. Good information. Zoe, thank you. All right, coming up, Georgia investigators sharing new last month's school shooting that left 4 people dead. We'll have more on that. You're watching CBS News 24/7. It is part of our mission here at CBS News 24/7, telling your stories from your communities. Workers in their 50s are generally at peak earning potential, yet more than half worry they'll run out of money in retirement. CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger visits one couple in their 50s who want to be saving more for later, but have a lot on their plate.
Dinner time at the Gomez residence in suburban Boston means feeding 3 generations.
It's crazy. We're raising my niece and nephew. My mother lives with us, and my sister lives with us.
So how many people total in this house?
7.
Alicia, 56, works for a nonprofit, and her husband Chu, 58, works in logistics. They're part of the sandwich generation, workers supporting young relatives and aging parents.
I equate it to a turkey club sandwich because the club sandwich has a lot of layers, and we have a lot of layers.
Sandwich arrangements like this account for roughly 5 million U.S. households. They can easily wreak havoc on retirement plans.
How do you think about the future?
We were thinking 62, and we can retire at 62 and still be young. And the other day she says, "You're going to work to 70, right?" I'm like, "I guess so."
50s is a good time to save.
People in their 50s, says labor economist Teresa Ghilarducci, need to put away as much of their earnings as possible.
In your 50s, you may be pressured to help your adult children. You may be pressured to even help your older parents, but don't sacrifice your own retirement savings.
The Gomez's are saving, but they are more than $500,000 in debt, including house, car, and college loans for their 2 daughters.
How long before those are paid off?
He's going to be 71 when they're done.
Yeah, we'll have those for a long time.
The Gomez's do have a nest egg, but not a big one. If you're in your 50s like them, here's what to consider. Have honest conversations about how long any assistance for relatives, like any older children, will last. Temporarily reduce retirement contributions to pay down any high-interest debt, like credit cards. Then, importantly, don't forget to boost your savings.
Is the money coming in covering the bills that you have?
We have enough, but it's not where we should be. God forbid if one of us gets sick or we are laid off, what will that do to us financially?
Well, people in their 50s have a really high chance of losing their career job. So watch your back, keep your job.
Both Alicia and Chu were in fact laid off in their 50s. Alicia picked up consulting work, then was rehired. But it took Chu 6 months during the pandemic to find a new job.
When you get laid off, you can't do the 401k, so that was 6 months of 401k that was not being put in there.
Chu missed $13,000 in 401k contributions, which would have been worth roughly $40,000 by the time he retires, and could have helped cover some retirement costs, like health insurance. On average, a retired 65-year-old should expect to spend about $165,000 on health care throughout retirement. Do you think about that?
It's funny, you know, until you bring it up with somebody, oh yeah, that other thing, that's always there.
Take your time.
The retirement pressure never lets up.
We didn't know we were going to have to care for so many family members. So the unexpected was a wake-up call, I think, for us.
For the sandwich generation, saving for the unexpected is the best answer to that call.
That sounds good.
For Eye in America, Jill Schlesinger in Draycote, Massachusetts.
Georgia investigators sharing new details about last month's school shooting that left 4 people dead. They say Colin Gray, father of the suspected shooter, knew about his son's troubling mental state before the tragedy unfolded. Investigators revealed what they found in Gray's home during a preliminary hearing. It includes a notebook with graphic drawings, a shrine to school shootings, and a note saying, "Forgive me, it is out of my control." The judge ruled there is enough probable cause for Colin Gray to stand trial. All right, taking our monitors now to the open roads. Tesla is once again under fire by the National Safety Administration. This time, the agency opened a case involving Tesla's self-driving system. Officials say they received 4 reports of crashes in low visibility conditions. At least 1 person died as a result. An estimated 2.4 million Teslas will now be checked as part of that investigation. And a historic visit to Australia for King Charles and Queen Camilla, the trip marking the first visit by a reigning British monarch in over a decade. The royal couple plans to visit Sydney and Canberra over the next 6 days. Then they're off to Samoa to open the annual Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. All right, let's take you to New York City and let's talk pigeons. The pigeon population just got much larger thanks to a massive bird named Dinosaur. Yes. So the sculpture of a pigeon now towers over drivers and pedestrians at New York City's High Line. So the Colombian-French artist behind this piece says he wants to celebrate the small bird and won't give a nod to its ancestor, the dinosaur. So as it turns out, Dinosaur will loom over this intersection of 10th Avenue and 30th Street in the Big Apple, the home for it for the next 18 months. You can't miss it. All right, that's it for us. Thanks so much for joining us here on CBS News 24/7. Have a great day.